Good morning, y'all. I've got another cup of coffee here, and it's a Monday morning, which means it's time for another episode of the What I Wish I'd Said podcast. This is just, it's like a one take, super raw. As I'm thinking back over the message from yesterday, was there something I thought that maybe wasn't clear, something I wish I could have said a little bit better, spent a little bit more time on? And so as I've considered that, I keep going back to that section in Romans 9 that we read about where it says in verse 22, what if God, choosing to show his wrath and make his power known, bore with great patience the objects of his wrath, prepared for destruction? So if we could just unpack that, I mentioned yesterday that Paul is writing this in Romans, and he also wrote something in Ephesians where he called himself an object of wrath. And why is that so important? It's important because a lot of people, and I briefly mentioned this yesterday, they would fall into the Reformed camp of theology. A lot of people do believe that God prepared some people for heaven and some people for hell. Listen, I don't agree with that. It's not what I believe, but people that do believe that are also going to be in heaven with us if they believe that Jesus has secured their salvation and is the only way to God, right? So it's always Jesus is Lord. That's where it starts. And a lot of people that believe that Jesus is Lord also believe that certain people will be saved, certain people will not be saved. And it's because God prepared certain people to not be saved. He created them as objects of wrath in order to show his mercy. Now, I read Ephesians, and I'm going to go there next. And I think, is it possible for objects of wrath to be redeemed? Sorry, a little coffee real quick. And apparently, Paul would agree that it is possible because he wrote in Ephesians chapter 2. Let me get to it. Sorry, y'all. He said, as for you, you were dead in your transgressions and sins in which you used to live, notice the past tense, when you followed the ways of this world and of the ruler of the kingdoms of the air, the spirit who is now at work in those who are disobedient. All of us, how many? All of us also lived among them at one time, gratifying the cravings of our sinful nature and following its desires and thoughts. Like the rest, he's including himself there, we were by nature objects of wrath. And that's what I want you to get. We are born as objects of wrath. When Adam and Eve blew it in the garden, when they disobeyed God, when they chose their own way versus what God told them to do, they sealed us as objects of wrath. We're all born into sin. But the great mercy and love of God is able to redeem people like me and like you and like Paul and like the people he wrote to in Ephesus and like the people he's writing to in Romans. His mercy and love is they're able to redeem us so that we're not objects of wrath prepared for destruction, but we're actually objects of his grace. Paul even talks about being a trophy of grace that are being prepared in the image of Jesus. Y'all, this is the good news of the gospel, and we need to be sharing with people. We don't need to meet people that we don't like or people that are mean and just like write them off and say they're too bad to ever be redeemed by God. No, we need to remember that we also were objects of wrath. We were by nature going against God, and he redeemed us, rescued us. That's the reason why his mercy is such an amazing gift. And I just wanted to encourage you with that again today. Don't get caught up in all the things that we don't know and can't answer. There are obviously always going to be questions we can't answer. And that was the point of the Billy Graham story. I love that Billy Graham, arguably the greatest evangelist, that we've ever seen in our lifetime, recognized that there were questions he would never be able to answer to fully satisfy somebody's desire to want an answer. But instead, he knelt before that stump. He knelt before the Bible, and he said, God, I believe the authority of your word. I believe in its truth, and I'm going to put my faith and hope in you through it. That's where we want to be. And when we get to that point, people can ask us questions like, was I destined for good things or bad things? And we can clearly say, according to Scripture, you're destined to encounter the mercy and love of Jesus. What will you do with it when you do encounter him? So I want to encourage you today, man, go tell people about the love of Christ. Go share about his mercy. Be all about a person who used to be an object of wrath, but now, because God was rich in mercy, you are prepared in the image of Jesus. I love you guys. I can't wait to hang out with you again next Sunday as we dive into Romans chapter 10.